Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and I'll be honest, right off the bat, this is going to be the different kind of an episode than we've done in a long time. Normally we do buy or sell in the first segment. Well, that's actually getting pushed to the third segment, and our guest is someone that is a little bit different as well. So just kind of a heads up, if you're not into this first segment, we hope that you will fast forward and fast forward to what we're going to talk about in the third segment, because we have some interesting things as well. But the lead story around the University of Arizona is Jayden de Laura and the allegations around some of his misconduct 5-6 years ago. And Shane, I know you have been very, vocal with me in wanting to discuss this up front.
Well, we talked about it, and just so people know, you and I discuss. Eric always puts together the outline for the show. You do a great job doing it, and we actually had a bit of a difference of opinion on where to talk about this, and we wanted to push it until our last segment because I'll just go ahead and mention our guest. We have Lynn Kawano, who helped break the story about Jayden de Laura and his teammate in high school in Hawaii. She's going to join us to give us a little more information. If you're someone like me, who's like, you're not sure exactly how to feel about everything, you want some more details, she's going to help provide some of those. So again, like you said, not our traditional guest, not the guest we'd really, all due respect to Lynn, would like to have on. It's not what we really want to talk about right now, but I think it's important that we do. The details of the civil case, and we're not going to go into all of them, but they're disturbing to say the least. A lot of Arizona fans and alumni are disgusted by what they've read. Some even have told me just through Twitter that they won't root for the team as long as Jayden de Laura is part of it. I certainly understand that perspective. There are others who believe either because this took place when he was a minor or because it's a civil suit, which has a far lower burden of proof than criminal cases do. This is not a criminal case. That it's best that Arizona simply move on. Arizona's statement last week about he remains a part of the program was sufficient. Either way, I think it's important we discuss this. And so, yes, we are going to talk about it a lot in this episode. Some listeners, some viewers aren't going to like that, and that's okay. But I think it's important to discuss. And I'm sure there are fans like me who have a lot of mixed feelings still, a lot of questions about the situation. And I think it's important to get some clarity on certain things before we move on.
Before we have Lynn on in the next segment, and, honestly, you and I recording this in order tonight. Normally we will, so every now and then we'll switch it up.
We're going in chronological order tonight.
Yeah, because I want to get out what we have to say before we hear from Lynn. So I'm kind of in the middle on this one. I think the actions, what we read, Lynn's story, that Jayden's actions were reprehensible. Yeah. And I think the biggest question that I have, Shane, is did Arizona and even before that, Washington State know the exact outline of this story or facts of this story before they had Jayden de Laura as a teammate? And same with the kid from Wisconsin who was involved.
Yeah, and Arizona and Wisconsin released similar statements saying that they both became aware of the civil suit in the fall of 2022, which was almost a full year after it. I think it was actually filed in December of 2021. So that's kind of interesting. Look, I'm kind of an old school guy, I guess, in that, I grew up as a fan of the Phoenix Suns, for better or worse, and Jerry Colangelo, who was always about doing things the right way. When someone on his team behaved poorly, the Jason Kidd situation, the domestic abuse, he traded him, got him out of town. He was that kind of, he wanted to win, but he wanted to do it the right way. And I've always thought along those same lines as well, and I know at least one local columnist has called for Jayden de Laura to be suspended. I disagree with that. I'm still not sure how I feel about everything, but I disagree. To me, this is simple, Eric. Arizona should either dismiss de Laura from the program or do nothing and move on.
I agree with that.
Because if you suspend him for 3 games or 6 games or whatever, what you're communicating is, we think Jayden de Laura is guilty of sexually assaulting that young lady, and his penalty should just be a suspension, which I don't think is sufficient at all. Either you believe that de Laura committed these acts and you dismiss him from the program, or you take into consideration, which I think Arizona is doing right now, that this was a civil suit, which again carries a much lower threshold for proof than criminal cases do. He was not tried criminally, and you decide that punishment of any kind just isn't warranted, even though it seems maybe counterintuitive to do that. So to me, it's one or the other. And to be honest, again, I'm not sure which one it should be. I have a lot of mixed feelings about the situation, but to me, a suspension would send a poor message. Either you dismiss him or you move on.
Yeah, I don't think a suspension does anything, Shane. I think, to suspend a guy for something that happened, 5-6 years ago, what does that do? You had a guy play every game last year. Now that the facts of the case are out, I completely agree with you. I have a hard time rooting for somebody that did this. So I'll just say that. I wanted to see Jayden de Laura succeed just like anybody else, but these allegations, and Lynn will tell us more in the next segment. So if you're interested in this story and you've made it this far, I'm sure you're going to listen to the next segment, and we're going to find out, together more than just what we read. I think that, personally, I think if it's proven true what happened, I wouldn't want the guy on my team. I'm going to say that.
Yeah, and the big question I'm going to, we have a lot of big questions to ask Lynn, and she's very gracious to come on with us and chat about it. But the big one to me is one of the big ones is why wasn't this case tried criminally? The civil suit is a different situation. And is there a reason this didn't go to trial? So again, I'm trying to be very careful because I don't want to suggest that anyone isn't telling the truth. But I want to have guys on our teams, whether, it's the football team, the basketball team, the men's tennis team, I don't care, who are good, upstanding people and do things the right way. And that's how I want our teams to win. Even though Arizona football you're about to turn the corner, and some fans are saying, well, of course, something like this is going to happen. It's, the Arizona curse. Well, to me, that's secondary. But I also, if Arizona's going to take that next step, I want to see them do it the right way.
All right. So I think the question is, Shane, if let's say this obviously goes through the civil trial and whatnot, and let's say there's a settlement. I
believe there was a settlement.
Oh, there was a settlement.
Yeah,
okay.
It's undisclosed amount, but yeah, I think it's been settled. Just the details didn't come out until last week.
I don't think either way. It's a lose-lose situation. I don't know that Arizona or de Laura, that there is a great outcome. I hope that this kid has reformed himself from that behavior, whatever it was several years ago. I don't know if there are rumors of anything that he's been a squeaky clean citizen since then. If he has, do you continue to let it go? I would be more likely to keep him on the team if there has been no disruption whatsoever and as far as good conduct. With that said, if there is even the slightest bit of negative conduct along with this, I think it's a fairly easy decision.
Yeah, if this was a criminal case or if this happened when he was not a minor, then to me it's an easy decision. I think the decision to dismiss him already would have been made, but I think it's more complicated. And you remember it's a DUI charge against de Laura, I think when he was at Washington State. I believe the charge was dropped, so you have to consider that as well.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If this was any other position, is this even a question mark right now?
You know what? And we don't like to talk about it, but I think that there is a level where I don't know, there's like this scale where the more high profile the athlete, the more likely you are to defend reprehensible behavior, and we saw that in Alabama with Brandon Miller. Now he wasn't charged with the crime, but I think, look, if he was an end of the bench guy, a lot of Alabama fans would be like, oh yeah, there's no place for this. Let's kick him off the team. But since he was their best player, one of the best players in the country, I think they're more likely to defend him. And we're seeing that on social media, a lot of Wildcat fans are disgusted, but a lot of them are saying it's good to move on. Let's just move past this. He was a minor, blah, blah, blah. And of course, fans of the rival schools, including ASU, are saying, how Arizona defends rapists, blah. And if everything reversed, all the comments would be reversed. So I don't really care about it. But I do agree with you that since he is the starting quarterback at Arizona, maybe fans would look to find more reasons why he should stay on the team, which of course is not the right way to look at it. It's not the way that I'm looking at it. At least I'm trying very hard not to look at it that way. But yeah, that is a fair question. The higher profile the athlete, the bigger impact he makes on the university, maybe the more likely we are to defend him. And that's not the right way to go about things. Just
to be, in full transparency, Jaden Bradley, Arizona's newest recruit, was at the scene of that crime with Brandon Miller.
Mm.
He nothing, he wasn't accused of doing anything. He stayed out of it, but he was there.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously I understand why they're not punishing him, and I'm not going to call for that.
Yeah.
I think this de Laura, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there is never any excuse to do harm from, physical harm from a man to a woman. There's no excuse for it. There's none.
No.
And, especially the details that we have read between the kid from Wisconsin and Jayden de Laura are ugly in this particular case.
Yeah. And eventually, go ahead, Eric. Go ahead. What
concerns me is that Arizona and Wisconsin did not know to the extent of these facts. And if so, and if that was covered up, it makes me less likely to want to keep him.
Well, and both schools, and again, both schools have said, because this the case was filed in December 2021, 3 years after it allegedly happened. And they're saying both Arizona and Wisconsin said they didn't become aware of it until fall of 2022, which, December 2021, that was before Jayden de Laura had transferred to Arizona. So I think it's one of the questions I'm going to ask Lynn is, how is it possible that neither school knew? Because I actually believe them when they say it, because if they're putting that out there and we find out that's not true, they knew about it beforehand, they're going to be in a load of trouble. And I'm sure that their communications team, their legal team, they went over everything very carefully before they issued. It was a very basic statement, but I guarantee you a lot of people looked at that statement and they were very careful about it. So, but it is a question that I'd like to ask Lynn Kawano. It's like, how is that possible that neither school knew about these details? And I don't know all the legal aspects of it. I don't know if some of these things were sealed to a certain point or what, but hopefully Lynn can help navigate us through that.
All right, Shane, I'm going to ask you this immediately before the interview, and I'm going to ask you this after the interview.
Okay.
Should Jayden de Laura, based on what you know now, be a part of Arizona's football team next fall?
At this point, I would say yes, but subject to change based on some things that might come out. I got a lot of mixed feelings about it. Again, he was a minor, and which doesn't excuse his behavior, but he was a minor, and it was a civil case, not a criminal case. And I don't know if there's a reason for that. So maybe after our conversation, I'll have a different opinion.
I would agree with you, but I also would agree with the last part that I might have a different opinion. And we'll talk about that plus buy or sell in our third segment. But coming up next year on Wildcat Country, Lynn Kawano from Hawaii News Now with more on this situation.
What's up, Wildcat Country? It's Robbie G, baby, and I am gearing up for a big year with Coach Jetfish and excited to see what the Arizona Wildcats do this football season. And just like the football team, we stepped up our program as well with the official licensed U of A Ice Shaker, baby. Check it out and get it at fanatics.com. Bear down, Arizona. Let's go.
Shane, I think as you mentioned in the last segment, this is not the guest that we had thought about originally, but you know what? She put out a story that was really informative, and we wanted to get to the bottom of it. So Lynn Kawano, award-winning journalist and reporter for Hawaii News Now, joins us here on Wildcat Country. Lynn, first of all, thank you so much for coming on with Shane and I. My first question is, do you believe that Wisconsin and or Arizona knew the extent of what you published last week before they brought on these players on their roster?
Well, aloha, guys. I don't think they knew the extent. I don't know that for sure. There's an NDA, so the non-disclosure, so the attorneys aren't really telling us much. But I will tell you this. I was surprised that they both said they were notified. This is the University of Wisconsin and the University of Arizona last fall. So we're talking 2022. But the complaint was filed in 2021. So there is this long gap, right? There's a year gap. And when I went back and researched that, I wanted to figure out why that long gap before the players notified the schools. The first complaint came down in December 2nd on 2021, and it didn't have the victim's name. It was the first complaint. Some things were filed, and then there was some back and forth in the court docket. But really, it wasn't until that first amended complaint, which was last fall, which was 2022, that dropped, and that used the victim's name, and that had a few more details in it. And then all the players got served, their families got served, as well as the school, St. Louis school here in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I think that maybe that was a trigger, that this wasn't going away. This wasn't just a victim who wanted to remain anonymous, didn't want to, put herself out there. Once that first amendment complaint came out last fall, it was clear that she was gonna go with this, and she was gonna fight it. So I don't know if the schools knew ahead of time, or what they knew, or the extent they knew, or even if they asked. But I would certainly think that this seemed to have been a shock to many people, and the fact that the spokespeople, the ADs, and any of the information officers didn't get back to anyone until 24 hours later for Wisconsin, and then 48 hours later for Arizona. I think perhaps they were trying to gather their thoughts.
Yeah, Lynn, like Eric said, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate providing some insight and be answering some questions. A lot of fans like myself who still have a lot of questions and mixed feelings about all of this. So we appreciate your time. Let me start with this. What is the reason? Because this incident allegedly occurred in 2018, and then the civil case was filed 3 years later. What? Take us through that. Why the 3-year time difference there?
Yeah, and Shane, there always is a gap. Well, sometimes they do the civil stuff first if the criminal stuff is taking a long time. In juvenile court, it doesn't take that long. In juvenile court, there's no jury, so there's no jury selection. There's no jury trial. In juvenile court here, it is a judge, and if the boys wanted to fight it, they could have gone to trial, where a judge makes the decision, and the process happens a lot faster. So there is quite a gap there. I'm not exactly sure why that long gap. No one is giving us a lot of those details, but it's not really unusual. I've worked many of these cases, both civil and criminal, and there often is a gap. A lot of times you hear about civil cases coming out years later, but in the juvenile system too, it's secret. Everything's secret. We cannot get these records. And I have known about this case for some time before breaking the story. I wanted to try to do my due diligence with the juvenile system. I did ask our court system. I did ask the spokesperson for the judiciary here for any information regarding this family court case. And I also asked the prosecutor's office, and everywhere that I went, it took a while, but I got the we do not comment on juvenile cases. So I tried to do my due diligence. I did know about it for at least a couple of months.
So to be clear, this case was never tried criminally, correct? Do we know why?
It was never tried. According to the civil complaint, the boys pleaded guilty, right? That's what is said in the civil complaint, that the boys pleaded guilty to sex assault too. And when you plead, you don't need a trial. In the juvenile system, we can't confirm this because we can't get access to that file. But I did speak with a legal expert who works a lot of these juvenile cases, and he said, the terms are very different, and the handling in juvenile court is different. And part of that reason is because they're minors. I will say this, he had heard with this case and these boys, there was consideration of possibly charging them as adults. That would have changed everything, right? Because everything would have been out in the open. Yeah. So perhaps there was a long gap because they were trying to figure that out. They were trying to work that out. In many instances, if the victim wants to go and take this case and go to adult court, if the victim's willing to do that and take the stand, put themselves out there, that could happen, but it's not an easy process. You do need a judge to approve that. They have to go to psychological testing. So it's hard to say what really happened here and why it didn't go to trial. But I assume the pleading guilty, as the civil complaint says, is one of the reasons it halted the case where it was. And if you look at the dates on when that supposedly happened, it's possibly up to the point where the boys were getting ready to start playing football again.
Lynn, what has been the reaction back on the islands there once you broke this news? Have they been supportive of Jayden and the other athlete, or not as much?
Like what you guys said earlier, we have some people who are calling me, sending me emails saying, enough already. This happened a long time ago. They were kids. kids will be kids. And then there's a lot of people saying this is unacceptable. How did we not know about this sooner? Because it happened in October of 2018. How are we only finding out in 2023? That sounds crazy to so many people. And why did we not know sooner? So it is very mixed. The movement where we are not going to allow this type of behavior in sports. There's that side, but there's also another side that says there were kids, they were under 18. The criminal system has taken care of it, so we should push it aside, just like what you guys are hearing in Arizona.
So, Lynn, I'm this is my big question. And I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm gonna ask you anyway. Should this be considered an admission of guilt by both athletes? Or since the burden of proof is much lower in civil cases versus criminal cases, it's more likely than not versus guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Is it possible it made more sense in this case for the athletes to simply settle and move on regardless of what actually took place? Or should this be, they wrote an apology letter, they admitted guilt, and that's that?
I think, like you said, just putting it behind you is, no one knew about it, right? So when this settlement was happening, when this mediation was happening, the settlement talks, it hadn't come out yet. I don't know the real answer because of the NDA, but I will tell you, thinking no one's going to find out, thinking, hey, it's been 4.5 years, almost 5 years, maybe we just get rid of it, we get it done. Because this civil complaint was not in juvenile, right? This civil complaint is out in the open. And if they went to trial, which is still possible for the school, for St. Louis school, if they went to trial, it'd all be open, meaning cameras allowed in the courtroom, we're allowed to sit and watch, the victim could possibly testify. So maybe there's a little bit of consideration there. The lawyer for Kamo'ilatu, the University of Wisconsin, starting safety, Michael Green's the attorney, and he said, we wanted to let the woman move on with her life, let the boys move on, continue with college. That was his reasoning to go ahead and settle. I do think part of it was still a secret at that time. And now that it's settled, it's no longer a secret. Do they regret doing that? I don't know. The boys won't respond to us and their lawyers won't answer that question, but certainly thinking that this is going to go to circuit court, meaning anybody can go in and watch, anybody can get video of it. I think that might have played a role.
I know we're really getting deep into speculation territory here, but considering these were civil cases and not criminal cases, is that possibly a reason, in your opinion, that both Wisconsin and Arizona have both said that, at least for the time being, both athletes are still members of their respective programs?
I would hope so. I would think that if there was a active criminal case happening, that the schools might have taken a little bit more weight in deciding on what they were going to do. I don't know the answer to that, but I would think that, yeah, a civil case is different, right? Honestly, people can sue for anything in the civil courts, right? But the civil lawsuit referred to a criminal case. And I think that's where things are a little bit different, right? It's not just a he said, they said, she said, it's not any of that. If there really was a criminal case that ended with them pleading guilty to sex assault, I would have hoped that the schools took that into consideration. But certainly if this was a criminal case active going on right now, I believe, and I would like to believe that the schools would have taken a little bit more weight to that.
And finally, my last question for you, Lynn, as far as Jayden de Laura goes, just what have you heard about Jayden de Laura, the person, from coming out of high school? Does he have a reputation that you're familiar with, or is he more anonymous around the Honolulu area?
He's not necessarily anonymous. People know who he is. He is living in the shadow of a Marcus Mariota when you're talking about St. Louis School. St. Louis School is an incredible school for athletes. It really is. Marcus Mariota is certainly the star. And given that he was still in the NFL when Jayden came out of St. Louis, there's a lot to be said for someone like a Marcus Mariota, who is seen as just a great community person, a great spokesperson for the school, for whatever team he's playing for. So, people knew Jayden de Laura. He certainly was well known amongst the high school athletes and amongst the sports community here. But in terms of what we know about him, we did hear about, when he was at Wazoo, when he was at Washington State, and the DUI that was dismissed. So there was that going on. And then, the anti-vax group that he was part of with Coach Rolo, and Coach Rolo ended up getting fired because of that. There was a lot going on. And so his name was out there, not necessarily in the best light, but, he was able to clear that DUI. Everything was dismissed. Everything was good. He landed on his feet in Arizona. And I do think that he was still considered a high school football star here.
Let me ask one more real quick, Lynn. Is there anything else we can expect to come out of this? You mentioned that the high school may face a lawsuit, other than Arizona and Wisconsin possibly making additional statements down the road. Do you know anything in Hawaii that might come out of this, or is this pretty much it for now?
Well, the school is still fighting the suit. So the case was the St. Louis school et al., and it added Jayden de Laura and Kamo'ilatu in that. Now those two and their families have been taken out of it. So it's just the school, but that lawsuit is continuing. And I have asked legal experts, if St. Louis chooses to go to trial and fight this, would the girls have to take the stand? And would the girl have to take the stand? And would the boys have to take the stand? What is the ramifications here of the school pushing forward? And that's still unclear. But as of right now, there's no trial date. A lot of the legal experts say the school is probably going to settle. In many of these cases, they do settle. So I'm not sure what's taking so long, but that could be down the road. And of course, once fall camp starts, these are questions that's going to come up again. But as far as the legal and civil lawsuit, we're waiting to see what the school does.
Well, Lynn, we really appreciate you coming on with Shane and myself just to kind of explain the facts of the case and let people who are listening make up their own minds as to the future of Jayden de Laura. So we really appreciate it. And thank you so much once again.
Of course. Aloha, guys.
Thanks to Lynn Kawano for joining us. Great information from her, Shane. Once again, I'm going to ask you the same question that I ended the first segment with. Should Jayden de Laura, in your opinion, based on what we found out from Lynn, be a part of Arizona's football team in the fall?
And a big thanks to Lynn for joining us. But yeah, I still feel the same. I think as of now, I put it this way. I think he should, as Arizona's very basic statement said, be a part of the program for now. If Arizona learns things on their own after talking with Jayden de Laura, talking to people around him, I don't know if they're doing that sort of thing or not. I'm interested to hear from Jedd Fisch about it because he's going to be asked at some point. I know he's not going to hold a special press conference to discuss it, nor is Jayden de Laura, but they're both going to be asked. I'll maybe form a better opinion there, but I appreciate the clarity, especially on Lynn noting that the case is still ongoing. The Jayden de Laura and his former teammate are basically their part is done. They've settled. But the lawsuit is still ongoing, so that maybe more things will come out of it. But it's tough to really know exactly where the truth lies. You got the civil versus criminal. It happened when he was a juvenile. So I want to be fair to everyone involved. And so for now, I'm fine. Put it this way, long-winded way of saying, Eric, I am fine that he's still a part of this program for now.
I would agree with everything that you just said. Honestly, I didn't, if more comes out, then we can discuss that from there. But as of what we know right now, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, though the actions were reprehensible. And I would understand if he remains a part of Arizona's team. Just say that.
Yeah.
All right. Now, for those of you who want to actually hear some Arizona sports and maybe some good news, this is Buy or Sell, presented by Ice Shaker. Check out iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off. Or go to fanatics.com and get your Ice Shaker because these things are amazing. All right, Shane, number one, I guess really this isn't that much happier. Taking the Big Five sports into consideration in the 2022-23 school year, football, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, and baseball. This Arizona athletics year should be considered a failure based on expectations. Buy or sell?
Based on expectations, collectively, I would guess have to buy. I think specifically because of baseball and softball. I think if we were just talking football, men's basketball, women's basketball, I would say, and again, you have to determine whether you want to use Giannis's definition of failure or not. It's up to you. But I think it would be considered a a positive, just those three sports, even though men's basketball lost to Princeton. I know that was ugly, but they still had a very successful regular season, and they're still, I would say, ahead of schedule in Tommy Lloyd's tenure. The football team, I think that was a success when you consider where they came from. The women's basketball team, I know they struggled, but they still, for the third straight year, won an NCAA tournament game. So I would consider that a success. But you look at where baseball was at a couple of years ago, where softball was at a couple of years ago. They're both struggling. Softball, especially. And softball, as much as we talk about men's hoops, softball has been the most successful program in the history of Arizona athletics when you look at championships, and Arizona is far from that at this point. And I still think Caitlin Lowe is going to turn it around. But if you add those five, I would say, I don't like to use the word failure, but I would say collectively, I would say it would lean more on the side of disappointment versus satisfaction.
Yeah, unless we get a national championship out of, let's say, women's golf or men's tennis. So good luck to them, by the way, in regionals.
Reach the Sweet 16 again. Yep.
Yeah, unless there's a national championship from one of those two, it's a failure, and I'll tell you why. Football was the only one that, in my opinion, exceeded expectations. Football, we thought 4 wins. They got 5, and they beat a top 10 team in UCLA. So that was, showed progress. Men's basketball, great regular season, choked in the tournament against a 15 seed. Hart, I know you won the Pac-12 tournament and you finished second in the regular season, but that's not a successful season to me. So I gotta bail on that one. Women's basketball, I think we all expected them to. I think you and I expected them to host a regional. And hopefully get to the Sweet 16, and they did not do that. So I'm going to, say that was a failure. And then baseball and softball have been bad, just flat out bad. So unfortunately, this has been a disappointment. There's really no way to swing it. Now, I'm going to ask you this, Shane. If I told you that relative to expectations, which may be lower next year collectively, Arizona, those 5 teams will exceed expectations in 2023-24, would you buy or sell that?
Well, it's hard to say what the expectations are at this point. I think for the football team, the expectations among most fans is probably a bowl game, 6-6. I'm still skeptical they're going to get there for the reasons I've outlined. I think they've gotten better. I think the rest of the Pac-12 has as well, and the schedule is tough. Men's basketball, that isn't that a fluid situation. I know we just don't have a lot more to talk about. We mentioned last week with Jaden Bradley joining as a transfer. There's another possibility with that maybe we'll learn more about the next week or two.
Rashad Johnson from San Diego State.
He visited Arizona.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And I think he's visiting Kentucky in a couple of days. So a lot of competition there, but we'll see. He's not maybe the most exciting offensive player, but a very good defensive player. So that would be a win. And we'll have to see what happens with Tubelis. He's probably out the door, but it's not a lock yet. So it's hard to say what expectations are. Certainly, the rest of the Pac-12 looks like they're going to collectively be better as well. The women's side, a lot of impressive young talent coming in, a great recruiting class. The additions through the transfer portal have been meh at best, I would say at this point. You never know what's going to happen. So, and then as far as baseball and softball, I'm still confident in Caitlin Lowe. Baseball,
but there's no expectations though. Next year.
Well, I still think there should be, but maybe there won't be. I think they got to add another elite pitcher, or they're not going anywhere. That's all it comes in softball. It's having an ace is just as important as having a star quarterback in football, because in softball you have pitchers who you need one star and then another who's decent in softball, and Arizona just doesn't have that. And then baseball, I think Chip Hale gets one more year. I think we saw glimpses of how good they can be. Their hitting's great. Their pitching has not been. That 20-0 win over ASU definitely helped us all feel a little bit better for the time being. And then they went and they blew a couple games at Oregon State. So as far as expectations, they're
going to be lower.
Yeah,
so that's why I'm going to buy. That's why I'm going to buy them, because they're going to be lower.
It's funny because football is going to be higher, but collectively for the rest, they're going to be lower. So I guess I'll buy it for now.
Good luck to the softball team. The first ever Pac-12 softball tournament, Hillenbrand Stadium. Arizona ASU is the play-in game.
Yeah, got it.
Winner gets UCLA. Good luck.
Both those schools have won multiple College World Series. So to see them both in the play-in game is it's
stunning. Stunning. Yeah. So I would say next year's, I think they will exceed expectations, because I don't think we think as of right now. I don't think that highly of the women's basketball team. Football team, if they go 6-6 and make a bowl game, that would be pretty much meeting or maybe slightly exceeding expectations.
The over-under is 5.5, and I think as of now.
Yeah, that's fine. So if they get to 6 and make a bowl game, I think if they fall short of that, it's pretty simple. Right now, I changed it. I think that they are a 6-win team, but I'm sure we'll discuss that.
And the question is, and I know we moved past this, but is Jayden de Laura going to be the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year? We'll wait and see, and that obviously will have a big impact on what happens.
Number 2, Shane, a Pac-10 TV deal involving CBS and ESPN would be enough to change your mind about leaving for the Big 12.
It'd make me feel better about it, but it wouldn't change my mind. I think that in terms of competition, I think joining the Big 12 long-term would be the best strategy. I just think that it's going to be tougher to, high school athletes want to play against some of the best competition. They want to go to a great school and develop, but they want to be able to play against some of the best as well. And with USC, especially USC, UCLA too, but with USC gone, I think that's a tougher sell. I would like to see Arizona play some tougher competition. In men's basketball, obviously we're excited about that, but football is the big revenue generator. So if that comes through, I have a hard time believing it after, they reportedly were talking to the CW. How do you go from the CW to ESPN and CBS? If that happens, great. I am still on the Big 12 train, though, long term. I think that makes the most sense.
Finally, here's a fun story for you. Last Thursday night, I was out to dinner in Scottsdale, and I look over my shoulder, and who is standing there but one Rich Rodriguez with Rhett, who was on our program a couple years back, and his wife Rita. And I talked to Coach Rod, and he couldn't have been nicer, as he's always been great to both you and I, Shane. Just in the limited times that I've met him, and I know you talked to him for your second book, I believe, Rich Rod versus Graham. And so it was just cool to talk to him. Just a couple of tidbits that I got from him there.
By the way, real quick, Rich Rod's the nicest guy in the world when he's not coaching football. He's a completely different man when he's coaching.
So he said that. He said, don't listen to what my, he goes, I'm a nicer guy than what my players have said about me. I said, well, we've had Al Sadek on, he laughed. I said, Matt Scott. He goes, let me tell you, if Matt Scott played 3 years under me, he would have been a Heisman Trophy contender.
Wow.
So I thought that was funny. It was great to talk to Coach Rod. Class act. And so it was fun to chat with him. And I said, listen, we missed you at Arizona, which after watching the Kevin Sumlin deal, we all can all agree.
I think he really enjoyed his time in Arizona. I know he still is upset about the way things ended, and I get that, but I think he really genuinely enjoyed being the head coach at Arizona and living in Tucson.
So I was really excited. I was texting Shane that night. I was like, oh my gosh, Rich Rod. I mean, how cool is that?
It's pretty cool. How random. Yeah.
Nobody else recognized him. Wow. So in the whole restaurant. But I went up to, and then he ended up sitting right in the booth behind me, which was crazy. And classy as always. All right. So here's the question. Number 3. Rich Rod was the most successful Arizona coach in terms of record plus program restoration since Dick Tomey. Are you buying or selling that, Shane?
I am going to controversially, is that a word? I'm going to stoke a bit of controversy possibly and sell it because I think Mike Stoops is that guy. Okay. I think Mike Stoops is the guy who, let's be blunt about it. If he didn't have some success at Arizona, Rich Rodriguez probably wouldn't have considered the program. Mike Stoops turned the program into a relevant program again. He came in like Jed Fish did, with absolutely nothing, maybe even less, because he didn't have the facilities that Jed Fish and that staff does. And he very methodically turned Arizona from a dumpster fire to a relevant program, and a program that was maybe a win over Oregon away from going to the Rose Bowl in 2009. I know the way that things ended, things tailed off at the end, recruiting tailed off at the end, which was kind of weird. But the last time Arizona had a great defense, all due respect to Scooby Wright, he was a great individual player. But the last time Arizona had a defense, a defensive line, a front seven to be feared, it was when Mike Stoops was there. And I think he does not get the credit he deserves. I think Rich Rodriguez did well. I mean, he got Arizona to the Fiesta Bowl, got into the Pac-12 championship game in 2014, won a lot of big games. But his record-wise, it was comparable to Mike Stoops. So just because Mike Stoops preceded Rich Rodriguez, I'd have to give that accolade to Mike Stoops.
Boy, this is a tough one, Shane. I've gone back and forth on this one. I mean, obviously, Mike Stoops kind of restored Arizona. He brought in Rob Gronkowski, brought in Nick Foles, brought in some NFL talent. But what Rich Rod did, he got Arizona to the Fiesta Bowl, as you mentioned. Yeah. And when you think about that, and I mentioned this last week on the show, and I think we all remember this, ASU has not been to a New Year's Six bowl game since 1997. Arizona was there in 2014.
True.
for all that you can say about Rich Rod maybe not beating ASU as many times as we would have liked, you know what? The fact that he got us to that game, the ultimate result, that he got us to a Pac-12 championship game and he got us to a big-time bowl game, I have to give him a slight edge, even though Mike Stoops is a legitimate argument. You guys think about it at home. If you have thoughts on that, let us know on if you're watching on the YouTube page. Give us your thoughts there, or give us your thoughts on Twitter.
Yeah, I would say the overall, I look back at those 6 years fondly, collectively. There were some rough times, 2016 especially, and some of that was stuff that happened off the field. It wasn't his fault.
When you think back to 2016, what's the first thing you think about?
Well, I think you're talking about the ASU game at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But not
you don't think that they were 2-9 going into that game? You don't?
Yeah.
Think
well,
that?
I sort of wrote a book about it. I think about it.
I don't think that.
I
think about the game. Right.
I get it. I get it. And the season ended great, and I was happy for them because obviously Zach Hemela passing before the season started was horrible. And then they had to go practice at the Cardinal Stadium because their facility was rained out because they didn't have an indoor facility at the time, and they had so many injuries, and it was one calamity after another.
And the quarterback situation was a mess too.
It was a mess as well. But yeah, collectively, I think back, the 2014 season was up until the last couple of games was amazing. It was an amazing season. They had some great upset wins. The big wins over Oregon. They did beat ASU a couple times, including the 2016 game you referenced and the 2014 game. They had the big win over Oklahoma State. By the way, I'm going to be in Stillwater this week for a completely unrelated thing from my regular job for a video shoot. So maybe I'll have a chance to check out.
You give us some thoughts on what you think about Oklahoma State as Arizona's new potential conference mate.
I mean, you might talk about that, but yeah, like I said, when I think about those 6 years overall, was it a complete success? Was it as everything we hoped for? No, but I still overall think of those 6 years fondly. And Rich Rodriguez deserves a lot of credit for what he did.
Going Rich Rod slightly over Mike Stoops. Thanks to Lynn Kawano for joining us once again. Listen, this was a show that maybe this last segment was for everybody, but the rest of the show might not.
It wasn't a fun show for the most part, but I think it's stuff we needed to talk about, and I'm glad that we did. And if you disagree, that's fine. And next week, hopefully, we'll be at back to our regularly scheduled programming.
So for Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks as always for listening, and as always, bear down.